Welcome to the I Love Buffalo podcast. Part of the I Love Buffalo network with your host, Josh Catry.
Welcome, good neighbors, to the I Love Buffalo podcast. I'm your host, Josh Catry. If you're new, a little bit about the podcast. We'll cover everything from Buffalo's news, business, sports, crime, art, music, politics, history, unsolved murders, corruption, jiu-jitsu, nature, the outdoors, entrepreneurship, upcoming events, and all things that champion the underdog city that we all love and the good people in it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today on the podcast, Eden business owner loses $7,000. Then this happens. The Buffalo Bills return to mandatory minicamp. Musky fishing season kicks off. Mayoral candidates fall in line over flouride. And it's the bicentennial of the Erie Canal. All this and more on this episode of the I Love Buffalo podcast. That right there was from local artist and producer Jay Monin of Buffalo Spirit Productions. It's a song called Growl at the Moon. As always, in this episode, throughout the episode, we'll be playing clips from this artist. So if you like it, check the notes in the show notes there. There'll be some links to Jay Monin's page. In our first segment, the mysterious case of the missing $7,000. So this past week on social media, there was an Eden Village group online, and they were talking about a man who lost $7,000 in a parking lot. And then a post came from that man himself, and his name was Thomas. And apparently he had an envelope containing about $7,000 worth of money. I guess he was saving to pay his taxes for his business, which is called Sadler Walls Landscaping. He was unloading some stuff out of a car, and he dropped it in a parking lot of a local business called Surefine. And he posted his story on this Eden community page. He was looking for help, just trying to see if anyone found it, maybe didn't turn it in, maybe was like, I'm just going to hold on to this money to see if anyone's asking for it. He wasn't asking for any money or anything like that. He was actually just looking for maybe the hopes that someone found it. And some people in the comments started posting, hey man, you should start a GoFundMe. We'll all throw in, we'll help you out. And it seemed like people knew who he was and what was going on. And eventually a GoFundMe was started. And on the GoFundMe, there was a description made by Thomas. It said, over this past weekend, I lost an envelope containing about $7,000 in Eden's Surefine parking lot on Saturday evening. This has been incredibly hard for me to come to terms with, and even harder to ask for help, but this is the point. I don't know what else to do. I had hoped that my earlier post in the Eden community page might reach the right person, the one who may have found the envelope, and might be willing to turn it in. I even offered a reward. I want to be clear, I don't place blame on anyone but myself. This was my mistake, and I take full responsibility for it. Still, I remain hopeful. I believe in the integrity of community, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in this community. I've been overwhelmed by the kindness and support from my friends and family and people I don't even know, and I've received over the last 24 hours is something that I'll never forget. Thank you to everyone who has reached out and helped spread the word. I'm still holding on to hope that someone will turn it in. The GoFundMe kicked off, and it was well on its way to raising money for him. Almost half of what he needed was raised when suddenly the GoFundMe shut off and all of his posts were removed from the Eden Township page. And so I found Thomas online and reached out to him, and I asked, I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to see what was going on, because to me, this was awesome to see that someone in the community needed help and the community was rallying around this person. But then how it abruptly ended with no conclusion, no thank you, no nothing. All of a sudden the GoFundMe stopped and everything else stopped along with it. It seems a little bit suspect. So I reached out to him and he did not respond. I tried scanning the page for more evidence of what was happening. I looked on his page. I searched for his name and I couldn't find any conclusion to this story. So I'm very curious what is going on with this missing $7,000 or the $3,500 or so that was raised with the GoFundMe. And if anybody knows what's going on, we would like to conclude this story. hopefully with a happy ending. Maybe he found the money. That would be great. But we don't have any answers right now. And this was kind of a viral thing over the weekend I wanted to address. In our next segment here, Josh Allen returns, as does Buffalo Bills mandatory minicamp. So Josh Allen came back from his wedding, but you could see there was a little bit rust early on as he threw 3 interceptions on day 1, but recovered with a strong showing in his next several days of practice. After the last play of last year's season, I know a lot of people might have had some doubts about Dalton Kincaid. He played injured last year. He did not have the best season. His first season looked like he was on a meteoric rise. And then last season, it fell off quite a bit, especially that last play that kind of left you pretty disappointed. Whereas if he would have caught that pass, the season would have continued. However, all accounts coming out of training camp are saying that he showed up in phenomenal shape and he has made some amazing plays already. Probably the highlight of the whole training camp was some of his catches in the end zone over defenders and things like this. So sometimes when you go through something that's sort of traumatic, it's like the whole team was counting on that play and he might have felt he let the team down or taken that personally or self-assessed his season. He came back, what appears on all accounts to be a bigger, better, stronger, faster version of himself. So that's good to hear. Also in attendance at the mandatory minicamp was James Cook. I thought, after he missed the OTAs, he showed up to mandatory camp and even voluntarily spoke to press. He didn't have to speak to the press. And he faced the press and said he wants to win the Super Bowl and said all the right things. And, he said he didn't want to lose money, which would have happened if he didn't show up to camp. He would have got fined. And this is like, it's not really a contract dispute. It's that James thinks he's worth something and the Buffalo Bills think he's worth something else. And when you look at it kind of objectively, it kind of comes down to James is saying, I got 14 touchdowns last year and that should be paid this way. And the Bills are saying, no, there's running backs that play all 3 downs and you only play usually 2 downs. So we're going to pay you like a 2-down back, but like the best one. So I think there is room to negotiate. I think if James goes on the market, he's going to find that he's probably not worth what he thinks he's worth because of this stat. He's also playing with Josh Allen, an amazing offensive line. He's a great running back. He's got real good vision. He's got amazing speed and burst, and his stats for yards after contact are very high. So he is a great running back. But he doesn't play all 3 downs. He's not very good at blocking. This is the problem. So on 3rd down, if we're trying to get extra pass protection for Josh Allen, James Cook is not really a good choice in this scenario. Josh Allen has even openly said that he prefers Ty Johnson, and he thinks Ty Johnson is the best 3rd down back in the NFL. Ty Johnson's a great blocker, and he's made some really incredible catches in clutch 4th down and 3rd down situations downfield. So it's hard to argue with that. Because of this, there is kind of a wide gap, it seems, between what James Cook thinks that he is worth and the Buffalo Bills think that he is worth. And I think probably the best thing is to let James go look on the free market. Maybe someone will overpay for him, but I think in this scenario, the Bills are mostly right. The Bills are not afraid to pay people exactly what they're worth. They've proved this over and over again. They've paid a lot of people ahead of time with their contracts who have earned their contracts. They want to retain their draft picks, it seems. They do a really good job of drafting and developing and then paying their players. And I think James Cook could be in this mix, but I think he has unrealistic expectations for what he's worth. Or maybe not. I guess we'll see. If he goes out and has a great year, maybe the Bills will pay him then. The players are now on break until late July, and that's when the team will return for official training camp at St. John Fisher University in Rochester, and HBO will be there filming this for the Hard Knocks segment. In our next segment, this coming Sunday, June 15th, is the start of the Great Lakes musky fishing season. And as you've heard me say before many times in this podcast, we have some of the best freshwater fishing in the world here. If you're not taking advantage of it and at least exploring it, well, I think that is kind of sad because it's amazing. They call the muskie the fish of 10,000 casts, but if you go fishing with me and my friends, we like to think of it a lot less than that. Maybe our egos are in the way a little bit, but also our past iterations kind of show that we can catch muskies. Usually it's about almost once every other outing the boat will get a muskie on average. Some outings you get 5, sometimes you go 5 days without getting a muskie, and it really depends where you're fishing too. Some areas are better for just catching a muskie, but a lot of the times these days I'm looking for the muskie, the biggest one in the system, and those can be very, very hard to catch. For example, the Lake Erie proper is a great place to catch a monster muskie, and I went almost 15 years between 50-inch fish, spending between 50 and 100 hours in the harbor and Lake Erie per year. Granted, if you're a new fisherman and you're on the boat with me and you never caught a muskie before and a rod goes off or something like that, you're very likely to get the rod handed to you and catch a muskie. So it's not really like a personal quest. It's kind of like a team effort when you're out in the big water. That being said, it's still super hard. I might see a really, really good fish in that Lake Erie water once every 3 to 4 years, something along those lines. It's not an easy fishery. It is small numbers, hard work, and you can increase your odds with knowledge and timing. At one point in my life, I was so into muskie fishing that me and my friends started a fishing lure company called Red October Baits. Started in my friend's garage, moved to my garage, and then we eventually got a shop and another shop and another shop. About 10 years ago, I started a jiu-jitsu academy, and it was too much going on, so I pulled myself away from that, but it lived on. It's called Red October Baits. It's out in Lakeview area, and there's a whole shop out there, and the lures that you make are big, giant tubes. So if you're familiar with bass fishing, there's like soft plastic tubes used for bass. We make big, giant ones for many years, and it's still one of the best lures, if not the best lure, in terms of numbers of fish in the area. You know, for the last 15 to 20 years, it's undoubtedly the best lure that's caught the most fish. Is just a simple tube, usually casted or dragged on the bottom in either the river or around weed beds and things like this. If you're heading out this weekend, good luck to you. Keep in mind that our fishery is a wild fishery. It is not stocked, and this is why we defend it with things like the limit to, if you wanted to keep a muskie, it has to be 55 inches or longer. I've seen 2 of those ever in our whole system. And so it's very, very rare if you want to keep a fish. And even then, you should let those big fish go so those genes stay in the gene pool. There's no prize for a world record. There's nothing except for ego. And you're not going to eat a muskie. It's purely the problem solving and the difficulty level of trying to catch one that is the enjoyment of it. And this is why we take really good care of the muskies when we catch them. We keep them in the water, in a net. We use bolt cutters and pliers and tools to make sure that they're safe. We even participate in scientific projects like tagging muskies. I personally have tagged around 100 muskies in my life, and this adds to being able to track the fish and see their movements and things like this, because it's hard to study them any other way besides angling because they're so low density and hard to find. And so only the anglers really have the ability to do that. You can do shocking studies when they're spawning, but it's only a small limited window of time. And then you're disrupting their spawning. You're shocking an animal with electricity before it spawns, and that might not have good health effects on it. So if you're angling for them, it's a pretty safe way. Please try to handle them as safe as you can. If you want to learn about this more, there's something called the Niagara Muskie Association, the NMA. They have monthly meetings, and you can go meet people that are trying to learn how to catch muskies, how to handle muskies, how to release muskies, where to fish in our area. You can meet really awesome people. Some of my closest friends in the world I met at this conservation club called the Niagara Muskie Association. But if you're heading out this weekend, good luck. Check our social media. We'll post some pics this week of some giant muskies caught right here in our backyard that I bet most of you didn't even realize existed. As you all know, no topic is off limits here on the podcast, and we're going to dip our toes into some controversial topics, this one being fluoride in the water. This week, it was rather disappointing to me to learn that our local candidates for mayor were all asked how they felt about adding fluoride back into the water, and they all pretty much had canned, political, labeled responses without having any nuance or discussion to the topic. This was kind of sad to see. 9 years ago, they stopped adding fluoride to the Buffalo water because of systems problems. They needed an upgrade of system to keep doing it. And then recently on September 24th, they ordered it back in and put it back into our drinking water without anyone's consent. All of these mayoral candidates pretty much gave the same response, saying that poor neighborhoods or marginalized neighborhoods all deserved access to oral health care. And a few of them cited some older studies calling it established science and things like this. As you know, I'm always skeptical of nearly everything that government does, especially when politicians claim it's for our own good. I personally cured my autoimmune and clinical anxiety with strict elimination diet. I did carnivore diet for 16 months. I ate beef, salt, water, and I reversed almost all my health issues that I've had. And so now I'm very wary of food. I'm very conscious of food that has chemicals or anything added to it. I always look back that doctors have recommended all kinds of things that have not been good for us. I remember that doctors once recommended smoking for health benefits. So this fluoride controversy is not just out of nowhere. There have been numerous studies that contradict the old ones, and they're alarming. Some of the new ones show side effects from drinking water that has fluoride added to it. And that's places like Germany, France, Denmark, and Sweden, the ones that we all love to point to and say these are good governed places, don't add this to their water because they feel like it's dangerous. So it's not just some blanket thing that everyone thinks one way. That's called groupthink. And groupthink is almost always caused by labels. Labels lead to echo chambers, and then echo chambers lead to groupthink. And the science behind fluoride is suspect. At the very least, it's suspect. And it was sad to not see one of these candidates at least address the fact that it's not some cut and dry thing. Go buy a bag of fluoride somewhere and look at it. It is labeled a neurotoxin. It has warning labels on it to not ingest it. And we add it to the water. It's a byproduct of industrial waste. So most of the fluoride in our drinking water in the United States is a byproduct of industrial phosphate fertilizer. So when they produce fertilizer, it's a runoff, and then they turn that into what we add to our drinking water. This can contain trace contaminants too, like arsenic, heavy metals. A bunch of things like this have been found inside the fluoride because it's not pharmaceutical grade fluoride they're adding to our water. At least not usually, unless something has changed. But some of these modern studies show an association between maternal fluoride exposure during pregnancy and IQ scores in the offspring of the children. This study was done in Canada. There's also a national toxicology program that did studies and suggested the possible effects of other neurological development as well. When I'm asked my political views, I do not like to answer with labels. I answer with words that have meaning. And mine are freedom and consent. Those are the two biggest words that I care about. I believe in freedom for almost everything across the board, as long as you're not hurting others. So your freedom to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. And you also have to have consent of people to do anything to them or for them. Putting fluoride in the water is a form of government mandated medication. It's delivered in mass, and there's not individual consent. And so I'm strongly against anything without consent. This is across the board. It's really hard to give me an example of one where I am for something without consent, unless somebody is incapacitated and unable to make their own decisions. If it's good for me, convince me. Make your case. And I should have the freedom to choose whether or not I want it in my water. And if I do want it, maybe there's another way to provide it for people. Because I'm not positive that it's not good for you either. I don't know. I'm just suspicious because half the things say it's good and half say it's not. And then I'm really suspicious when government forces things without consent and puts it on us. So they could do other things with this money instead of adding fluoride and fixing the water. They could offer free targeted dental programs or fluoride toothpaste or offer fluoride for people to add to their own water. That would be a lot cheaper. You could just pick it up and sprinkle it in your water if you want. Because what about the people that are poor that don't want the fluoride in the water? What is their route? They can't afford a water filter to take it out of the water. So this is forced on them without consent. Also, when you take a shower, it's absorbed in your skin. So it's not even just the drinking water, it's also your skin can absorb it. I was pleased to see the comments, a lot of informed people questioning this, as they should be. And let's do some crowd-funded studies. Let's do some more studies on our own, not funded by giant pharmaceutical Wall Street companies or things like this. Because if health problems are being caused by our water or our food, you're not going to really know about it if it's funded by the people who are profiting off of remedying that situation. Just like my symptoms that I had from autoimmune or from clinical anxiety, you're not going to really find doctors too often recommending diet. At least you weren't. I see this changing a lot, actually. I know a lot of people in the medical field are waking up to the fact that, hey, maybe, just maybe, a lot of these diseases are not actually diseases, and they're a form of poisoning caused by inputs such as our food, our water, our air, and our toxins in our environment. I don't speak about this from a point of view of just conjecture. I was sick, and I'm not sick anymore. And I know many, many people in the space of diet and health and wellness. I run a wellness festival several times a year. It's coming up actually in August. Lots of people have reversed or cured. I call it cured their autoimmune disease, because when you stop eating poisons and you stop having a disease, things like skin problems, psoriasis, MS, things like Graves' disease, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. I've seen all of these reversed, and I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. So if any doctors want to chime in here, we don't have to talk about it. We can bet. Let's bet. Let's see if your Western medicine cures people better than diet. And we'll take a pool of autoimmune patients at random. You take half and I take half, and winner gets a big chunk of money. Because I've seen it too many times now with, I don't want to say 100% success, but very high percent success. The things I have not seen is like, type 1 diabetes, you can't reverse that. People that lost their thyroid, you can't reverse that. So for me to be skeptical of putting chemicals in the water, it comes from a place of, hey, if I don't eat chemicals in my food, if I avoid glyphosate, eat organic, I don't just do only carnivore diet anymore. I've added more foods back into my diet, but I have to avoid foods that have any chemicals pretty much at all in them. Because if I eat foods with chemicals, I get symptoms of poisoning. Anyways, that's my controversial topic for the day. Back to some music. In our last segment here, we're going to cover the bicentennial anniversary of the Erie Canal. So it's the 200th anniversary of the Erie Canal opening up the waterways, connecting the waterways. They call it the wedding of the waters, where it connected New York City to the Great Lakes. And in 1825, Buffalo became the western terminal of this Erie Canal. And this instantly turned Buffalo from like a modest, chill kind of village into a strategic economic powerhouse. And it was booming. It was absolutely booming. On the corner of Hurdle and Norwalk is a restaurant called Taisho. It's a Japanese restaurant. It's like a sake bar kind of. But before that, it was a couple other things. It's got like this like 2-story. It's kind of a big place. There's a huge mural inside of it. And I was just there the other day, and this mural is just stunning. It's Buffalo in that time period in the 1800s when we were booming. And there are just people everywhere. The streets are full of people. It's looking down Main Street, and you got all these big, beautiful buildings. And it's just probably one of the most stunning photos I've ever seen of Buffalo. And that was this time period right here. The canal did this to Buffalo. Within a decade of the canal opening, Buffalo's population tripled 3 times over. And by 1840, it was one of the busiest ports in America, but there was a dark side to this. There were violent labor factions. The canal diggers and dock workers and lake sailors often settled disputes with violence in the streets. And there were rival ethnic gangs that came here and kind of stuck together, especially the Irish versus the Yankees or the German workers. They frequently clashed along the canal and the waterfront and in the saloons and things like this. At Pearl Street Grill and Brewery, where I work, there is all kinds of history on the walls and pictures of this time period. And it was known as the most evil square mile in the world, right there where that canal came out into the Great Lakes. They found on average 1 dead body a day floating in the canal during the heyday. So what would happen is people from New York City or Boston or that just got here to America came through the Statue of Liberty and wanted to go across America and explore. They would take everything with them in what's called a money belt. So it's like it's like a hip pack, basically like a hip pack you'd wear around your waist. It would have all your money and belongings in it. And people would go down the canal and come to Buffalo. And in Buffalo, there were saloons everywhere. And people would say, hey, come on in, have a drink. And when you did, they'd slip a Mickey in your drink and often kill you, take your money belt, and throw you through trap doors in the floors of the saloon that dropped you right into the canal. So this is kind of the dark side of the canal district that we lived in that we don't talk about that much. But Pearl Street has a really interesting, they're doing a history tour now. It's like self-guided. They're just getting it set up where you walk around and you scan a QR code and it kind of tells you the history of this time period. And there's all kinds of cool, interesting little tidbits that I'm not going to put all on here, but things like pictures of, some of these gangsters or pictures of people like prostitutes. There's one picture of a prostitute and she looks like the throw mama from the train lady, the lady from Goonies there. For some reason, I can't remember her name. It's skipping me right now, but she, it was not the most appealing looking prostitute that you could ever look at. We have a mugshot of her, Ann Ramsey. That's Ann Ramsey. And we have a mugshot of her as she's being arrested from this early Buffalo days. And it was thriving there because of the Erie Canal, but also that growth came violence. It came like rough living, lawlessness. And like I said, 1 dead body a day floating in the canal is a pretty high murder rate for a 1 square mile area down there in the heart of our city. So this is pretty interesting stuff. You can dive into it more. There's all kinds of things commemorating the bicentennial this summer of the Erie Canal. And if you're interested in that, I would just start off by visiting Canalside because they're doing stuff right there where they reconstructed the canal that can kind of point you in the right direction of all the other cool stuff happening in Buffalo about that. The business we want to highlight this week is the Lexington Co-op. So this is kind of cool. I really love the idea of groups that run businesses together. Everyone throws in money and we start something together. I think this is really cool. It's a good way to like circumvent the corruption of Wall Street by working in groups. And so I've been fascinated with co-ops lately. I went to a meeting at Buff State about co-ops just to hear what they had to say. And I kind of dove into the Lexington Co-op there and had a little guidance of where to look. I don't think that their systems are the best the way they run them. First of all, there's a ton of red tape. If you want to start a co-op, you got to deal with government inside and out, and it's hugely a pain in the butt. But the second thing is they use voting to make decisions. And as you know, I do not like voting as a way for group problem solving. I think it's okay. I think it's better than not allowing the group to have a say. But there are much, much, much better ways for groups to solve problems. They're called collective intelligence systems, and I talk about them quite often on here as well. And I wanted to see if anyone wanted to run a co-op or start a co-op or do something with a co-op that would be run on collective intelligence. So I attended these meetings and I learned about the Lexington Co-op. It's great. I like it a lot. First of all, it has a lot of organic products, a ton of products not owned by Wall Street. So it's owned by independent farmers and independent manufacturers and things like this. So I want to try to support that. Like all co-ops, it's community owned and it's democratically run. And the Lexington Co-op has over 20,000 local members who each get a vote in key decisions, such as like electing the board of directors and things like this. This shared ownership model ensures the business is rooted in local values and not just corporate profit motives like most businesses. It also keeps the money here in West New York. So like you give your money to some corporations, a lot of times that money is exported out of here. But when you give it to the co-op, it stays here locally. And I'm a big fan of that. And I think it supports over 150 regional farmers, producers, food supplies, food security, things like this, especially during times of supply chain disruption. It's way better to buy local, and they support that. And they also have a mission-driven, accessible business model. They got locations on Elmwood, Hurdle, and they offer more than just groceries. It's like an educational center, classes, community events, things like this. So I always talk about what's an ethical business. It's the 5 pillars of business. It has to be good to itself, good to its customers, good to its employees, good to its community, and good to the environment. The Lexington Co-op checks all these boxes, so kudos to them. If you're looking for something awesome to do this week, this is our events of the week, and as usual, there's a lot going on in Buffalo. A lot of the haters like to say there's not much going on in Buffalo, and they're wrong again as usual, especially this week. We had to really pare it down. Let's go through some of the events ending June 23rd. Starting June 17th at 7 o'clock, this 27th annual Picnic in the Parkway Summer Concert Series at Bidwell Park. It's a free event and happens every Tuesday throughout the whole summer. This week is music from Olmsted Dub System. On Saturday the 21st at Pearl Street Grill and Brewery is the Sunset Sessions on the patio. And this week is Freshwater 4. They are a surf rock band. On June 18th at 8 o'clock up at Art Park Amphitheater, the String Cheese Incident's rocking out. We got West Seneca Community Days is June 19th through the 21st at Centennial Park. Thursday night is Cruise Night, followed by music at 7 o'clock from Flipside in the beer tent. Friday at 7:30 is Nerds Gone Wild, and Saturday at 2 p.m. is a parade, followed by Hit and Run. That's like the beer tent band trio right there, crushing it. Salem Field this week, on the 20th at 5:30, we got Taste of Country. Live music returns to Old Falls Street, Niagara Falls on Friday, June 20th, every Friday night through the summer. There's food trucks, live music. Opening week is the Boys of Summer at 5 o'clock, and Mayday Buffalo at 7 o'clock. They have great summer music lineup, so check them out at NiagaraFallsUSA.com. At the Richardson Complex, the hotel over there, on the 21st from 12 to 8 p.m., Buffalo Summer Solstice Market. So if you like those markets and the farmers markets and things like that, art markets, this is one of those. At Canal Side on the 21st from 2 to 6 p.m. is the New York State Craft Brewers Festival. On June 21st at Riverworks at 7 o'clock is Less Than Jake coming to Buffalo. The M Hotel on the 21st at 6 o'clock has MMA and Muay Thai fights. This is hosted by K4 and the Art of Combat Sports Championships. So check that out if you like some good MMA. Buffalo Ironworks on the 21st at 8:30 has its 5th annual Juneteenth Freedom Party with live artist performance, DJ, local vendors showcasing food, art, fashion, and more. The Botanical Gardens on the 22nd from 5 to 9 has a boozy book fair. So get your drink on and find some good books. And again, this is just a small list of things happening around our city. Summer is just getting started, and there's going to be so much more to do every week. And that about does it. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. And let's remember, a rising tide raises all ships. Get your kids into jiu-jitsu. And the Buffalo Open Coffee Club, 7:30 a.m. every Tuesday at Seneca One Towers, open to everyone. People that are building great things in Buffalo go there. And if you're interested in connecting to people like that, come on down. It's free and you get some coffee and you can check it out. And now, Coach Josh's quote of the week.
The best line I've ever heard in my life. Sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but actually, you've been planted.